Hello, and welcome to another Ashes of Creations video. Today we're taking the 3-hour stream from Friday night and condensing it into something a bit easier to swallow. Now this is an exciting one, because this time they've revealed the tank. Well, not those tanks, but you get the idea. First things first though, the cosmetics. Now this is something. Now I enjoy the outfits. I enjoy the chariot pulled by the dragon. It's awesome. If you've watched my channel for a bit, you might know that I strongly feel that anything with more than 4 legs needs to die in a fire. So this set is pretty horrific for me. Maybe it's someone else's cup of tea. If so, you might want to change what you're drinking. We got the YouTube comment highlight.
I've been wondering how you will capture the storytelling from a casual point of view. A lot of the times where people reflect on what has happened in the MMO is by watching trailers. Arguably, in this person's opinion, one of, if not the best trailers out there is the Star Wars The Old Republic one, where they spend tons of money on capturing an audience through some phenomenal trailers. Are you looking to do the same, or what kind of trailers can we expect from Ashes of Creation? And this is from actually ePod, which, yeah, I have thoughts on this, but I'll leave it to you first, Stephen.
Well, SOTOR I thought did a great trailer and story and voiceovers. I thought all that was great with SOTOR. You know, we're an independent studio, and
we'll start there.
Let's start there. With that being said, there are certain budgetary requirements in order to afford very, high-end cinematics and voice actors.
Probably not getting a blur trailer if that's what you're asking.
Right, exactly. And what that means is how we want to implement on that front is really going to be in engine, in game, how we capture those scenes, how we capture those elements of story. And the good thing is that from a lore, narrative, and questing perspective, we have some functionality and tools that we're going to be utilizing to help tell the story from the player's perspective, because so much of the story is derived from player action, from community engagement, from the social interactions and decisions made along these different story arcs that can occur. And each server is different. So not, spending that amount of money or that amount of resources on creating these bespoke, very well done trailers, we would have to create a lot to kind of show how certain story arcs, what the outcome looks like in completing those things, because there's a lot of different ways these story arcs can end depending on what the players do. So we're going to leverage tech that captures kind of at the moment when something server first is done in the story arc, and those will be recorded on these memory fragments that players can collect within the game through their experiences and relive potentially through the cinematic that would be in game recorded, how an event went down, how a boss was killed, how a story arc ended, and they can collect those things throughout that server's life and history, which I think is a really cool way to tell the story of the server, the history of the server. I think that's super cool, and that's kind of how we're going to acquire it. It's really going to be meant to portray in game, and also based on what the players did. Margaret,
and so that's more like in-game cinematics.
Right.
In regards to trailers and things of that sort, we will definitely be making, trailers. If you saw it for Alpha 1, we made a trailer. We'll definitely be making some fun videos for Alpha 2 and Beta 1 and Beta 2. And of course, our launch is going to be a big deal for us. We will be doing lots of video snippets and goodies that we will be sharing and showcasing. So we'll definitely have trailers. They might not be, blur level trailers, but we will do our best to make some really sick stuff that gets people hyped. And we'll probably, from a marketing perspective, advertise in some spaces in order to get people excited about certain content pieces and advertise those to the right audiences. So we will definitely we're saving our marketing budget for the right spaces, for the right places. We'll be doing a lot of content creator stuff, as you all know.
In addition, they announced that the Content Creator Partnership Program should be rolling out around the time that Alpha 2 releases. That way they actually have content for the creators to work with. So, pray for your boy. And now, on to the tank reveal. Now, Steven did give a disclaimer. that this was an 8-man area they were in. They were level 12 or 13 and were undermanned for the content. And as always, this is still a work in progress, yada yada yada. Now, there was 3 major points of feedback that the team got from the cleric reveal. And that is 1, they want to see more reaction from NPCs when they're hit. 2, they want to see some more visual effect from the weapon when it contacts an enemy. And 3, they want to see the swinging animations be a little bit smoother during combat for the weapons. Now, the team took this to heart, and they applied it for the demo. That being said, keep the feedback coming on the forums and on the comments on their YouTube videos. This is exactly how we get the game that we want to see, by providing timely and useful feedback. Now, as usual, the graphics are great. This armor is definitely more my style compared to what we've seen in the past. Keep in mind, this gear is barely above starter gear. This is around 12 or 13. That being said, Steven definitely needs a cape or a sash of some sort to complete this outfit. And this demo, they're back in the Riverlands, this time in an area called Oakbane Keep, a point of interest that will be available in Alpha 2. This area used to be a training facility in the old Aelan Empire. Now we get to see some more of the UI, the map, the compass, some other info in the top corner, an objective tracker on the right side. We get to see the journal. It all looks very clean. I'm curious how it feels to navigate it in-game, if it's cumbersome or not. That's something we'll have to wait and find out later. The map looks good. I like the colors on it, kind of like a watercolor style. I assume you could zoom in on this map and get a different view. I'm curious if it looks the same. I'm sure it does, but I like it. I know they plan on giving tons of customization options for the UI, but let me know how you feel about it in the comments below. Now, the first ability up is Shield Assault, which requires a shield to use. It dashes towards and bashes the target with your shield, dealing damage and applying the shaken status condition. If the enemy is already shaken, they're stunned instead. It also grabs threat from the enemy, so it's a nice way to quickly grab aggro. Next, we see Inciting Strikes. This move slashes twice in a cone and adds additional threat. Threat in Ashes seems to be your pretty standard mechanic. You build it on enemies by dealing damage. Whoever has the most holds aggro. There are abilities like this that need to be rotated through your combo, but there will also be snap threat abilities to help you pick up new enemies or pull aggro back from a co-tank or a DPS player that gets a little too excited. Third ability is an AoE ability called Tremoring Bellow. Now, this ability releases a thundering shout and a forward cone that applies a staggered condition to enemy targets, dealing damage around the caster and tripping any enemy currently affected by a snare. Now, it is interesting that they combine different CC effects like this, but I wonder if limiting it to specific conditions is a bit more of a hindrance than it is anything else. Will parties need to consider what type of CC they're bringing to be most effective? Is this something that sweaty people are going to be using to min-max their parties, and you're not going to get into a group if you don't have the right CC? I wonder if it would be better to just have all crowd control follow a natural progression where you have like preparation CC abilities and then other abilities that can follow up on it. Like Tremoring Bellow is meant to be a follow-up move, so just have it knock down targets if they're affected by any status effect, not just a snare. Just an idea. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Next, we have a mitigation ability, Grit. This has a resource to manage along with it called Courage, which you build, I assume, through dealing and taking damage. This ability reduces your movement speed and damage output, but also reduces your incoming damage. Each time you're hit, it consumes a stack of Courage, and each stack of Courage consumed reduces incoming damage by 15%. Courage cannot be generated while Grit is activated, so it's something that you have to toggle on when necessary and toggle off pretty much any other time. Next up, we see Steven use Aegis. This instantly dispels all negative effects on the caster and creates a protective dome behind the tank for 15 seconds, transferring 50% of all damage received by targets within the area to the tank. All targets also receive increased resistance to status effects. Now, this ability is cool. I also feel like This is the perfect opportunity to include some sort of different animation once you pick your secondary archetype. If your secondary archetype is cleric, then the dome could turn into wings. If you choose tank again, it can turn into like a metal dome or some sort of rock-looking formation. If you choose ranger, it could be branches and tree vines. Just another way to personalize your character and make things kind of stand out. The last ability we will see is grapple. This ability grabs a single target and pulls them to you. This is nice to single out high priority targets and burn them down quickly before they can become a problem. Something that can happen when using this ability is that the enemy can resist it, because you can resist status effects in the game. And instead of being yanked towards the party, they're just rooted instead. Now, status effect resistances have been known for a while, but I can see this being a point of some debate. On one hand, it could be annoying to have a move fail when you're counting on it, could even lead to a death or a party wipe depending on the context. But on the other hand, including RNG like this keeps things fresh and can lead to some interesting scenarios where you have to think on your feet and react quickly. Which, if any of you have played a tank before, you know that's a fundamental skill for any decent tank to have. Now moving on, they fight this mini-boss, and you see that it drops a hammer. When it's clicked on, you see it prompts the players to roll on it using need, greed, or pass. Pretty standard stuff. What is cool is that later on, someone in the party wants to change the loot rules. So they go into their options, party options, and change it to what they want to see. The whole party votes on the changes. It's a pretty cool feature. Some important differences to note between the tank in Alpha 1 and Alpha 2 is that the tank is focused much more on defense and control, and they want to give more options to protect yourself and your party members. This aligns the tank with what the development team wanted the tank to be the entire time, kind of more of the classic tanking role, defending the party, leading the charge through dungeons. Their main responsibilities will be maintaining the attention of enemies, taking and mitigating damage for the party, saving party members when the healer can't, that sort of thing. So nothing out of the ordinary there. I know some people are a bit disappointed that it's nothing groundbreaking. For them, I say let's just hope that adding in the secondary archetypes can change up the formula enough to be interesting. Now, something that is interesting to see is how much of a visual effect our abilities will be able to have. As you see here, Steven's attacks are actually flattening the grass. Swinging their swords cuts it away. The team has been copying The Legend of Zelda's homework. And here we see a new tower shield that Steven gets. Look at it in all its glory. It's very polished, very shiny. Maybe too shiny. I would be interested to see if there can be a scale to that. I know I enjoy being the knight in shining armor sometimes, but there are other times that I want to look more like a battle-worn veteran. Perhaps the gear can visually start to look more worn over time, or based on the durability rating of it, and repairing the equipment restores its look. I'd be interested to see something like that. Something that I am always a sucker for is active blocking. I've been in love with it ever since I played Dragon Age. Here we see Steven using his active block on a Thunderbolt. The team discussed wanting to explore a perfect block feature, where you get additional bonuses for timing it correctly. I could also see this being a parry of sorts, or a projectile reflection, but let's see what comes of it. They're still going back and forth on how far they want to go with active blocking. Do they want it to be available to all classes or not? Will they give certain archetypes, such as tank, additional options in their skill tree to increase the amount mitigated or decrease the resource consumption? As of right now, they haven't reached a final decision. They finish off the video by showing off the gear they collected, and it's none other than the Titan Bark Male. He finally got that cape I recommended. Now, coming down from the tank reveal, we have some new character art. They have some Cyclops weapons, they have a spear, they have staffs, they have maces, they have bows. Look pretty good. Then we have the sword and the hammer that Steven used in the video. It's right up my alley. I love the gold accents on it. And next up, they have what they called the Carfin Shield, which is a tease at what is probably coming next. It sounds like we might get some gameplay at the ruins of the Tower of Carfin. Then we got some 3D models of some enemies, and a fan favorite, the Boulder Stone Bulldog. He's a mount, so I'm not sure he'll be this cute in-game when he's the size of a horse. Keep that in mind. We have this weird otter-butterfly hybrid called the Oak Stout, and the Risen Guardian. Also a mount, if you're into that sort of thing. Then they showed off some new Vec hairstyles, starting off with this interesting bun, this mohawk bun combination, and the long beard. For the ladies, we have a different take on a bun and a long ponytail. The character customizations panning out to be awesome and comprehensive as we've come to expect. Last but not least, we have the Q&A session where I've pulled out the highlights for your convenience.
It's from Cymex. We have a few that are actually tank related. So thanks, guys. You kept everything a little bit on topic, and then we have some that are not. So we'll start with the tank ones since we got it on our mind right now. The first one is about damage mitigation. Should a skilled tank be able to prevent all damage to their party, or should there be situations that no matter what your skill, the party will take some damage?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few ways that gets accomplished, both from an ability creation perspective with regards to the class kits and what they're capable of doing, but also in the encounter design and how we want to structure the AI and behavior tree of our monsters, not to be very simplistic in their engagement. So that is important. It's cool to, as a tank, have some control over the encounter, but it's also not cool if the control creates an entirely predictive gameplay loop. So, with that being said, excuse me, we want to introduce that element of chaos because that makes things kind of fun and reactive. And reactive gameplay is skill-based gameplay, and that's a good thing to have.
All right. And the next question is from Immortality. This is about general tank play. Will tanks have some form of stances to swap between that increases damage dealt at the cost of defenses?
Yes, so those are some hybridization options that should be available as part of the class kit. They can be further expanded upon with access to augment systems and depending on your secondary class choice. But again, the idea here is player agency. So we don't prescribe what that class fantasy or class role is. There's a lot of directions that players can take as part of that agency. And that comes down to how they compose their skill trees.
Tanks need to do two things: mitigate damage and hold aggro. How will tank weapons, shields, and armor balance these two dynamics compared to other gear sets?
Well, I think it does so in a few ways. I mean, obviously, stat composition and your itemization choices are important, making sure you're driving up your constitution-based stat allocation through selection of certain set bonuses and or stat modifiers. But in addition, a big portion of that is not just through itemization, but also through your skill tree selections. And they don't have to be diametrically opposed. The ability to kind of garner additional threat is predicated on your rotational selection and how you are leveraging certain types of set bonuses that are catered towards that role specifically. So some set bonuses will have specific, very targeted benefits like additional threat generation. But in addition, if you're going to mitigate damage, you need to make sure you're focusing on your health pool. How much health pool do you have available to you? What type of damage are you mitigating? Because we have different types of damage mitigation from magic to physical. And that's predicated on who your opponent is, where your adversary lives. Both of those are viable strategies.
Will I be able to fulfill my fantasy of having a ridiculously large health pool at the cost of other attributes?
You will have significant agency over the allocation of your stat progression. Yes, some of that will be baked in based on the archetype selection, but a large portion of that will come down to your itemization selection, your selection of tattoos and other ancillary types of augments and or benefits you can apply to specific items such as socketing. But generally, if you want to make a very con heavy HP focused tank, you can do that.
What steps are being taken or considered to make the tank archetype viable in PvP engagements?
Well, there is a whole host of things that are taken. It's important to note that in a lot of MMOs that probably many of us have played, PvP can feel like a slapped on design consideration. And our approach is very holistic in the sense that we take into account the fact this is a PvX game. So when we're designing the class kits, we are making sure that mechanics and designs are targeting applicability both in PvE settings as well as PvP settings. That's very important. There are also special mechanics like how threat is used in PvP, how taunts are used in PvP. Those things I think require testing, but we have some ideas that will make them relevant so that you don't have abilities that have no relevancy in PvE or PvP, but have some cross application.
And they want to know, how will off tanks remain useful in raids or dungeons when they don't need to tank for a specific fight?
Um, there's a few cases in which off tanks, of course, are relevant. I mean, when you're fighting in a dungeon, you have the occasional ads that come in, where the primary tank might be focused on keeping your groups, your party's target aggroed, and the off tank has the ability to kind of hold aggro on ads until the main tank is finished with their target. In addition, you have certain types of abilities like taunts that are immediate redirects on threat without having to acquire or accrue the appropriate threat to hold that aggro, that can utilize those taunts situationally based off of the threats that are appearing to the party. There's a lot of, I mean, there's a broad scope of applicability that applies to these types of roles like off tank, um, that I think are relevant and part of our overall kit designs.
It was stated that raid bosses would change difficulty based on how fast a group was clearing them. If the raids are supposed to be open and not instance, how does this work, or do rooms lock once a boss is pulled? And this was something you had
Well,
stated a long time ago.
yep. Yeah, so raid bosses are aware of the number of combatants within an area in proximity to them. And that awareness is part of an indicator to which behaviors they're going to utilize as part of their behavior tree. So as it's assessing the types of combatants that are facing it, the number of those combatants, the position of those combatants, the abilities and life totals of those combatants, it weighs certain actions in its behavior tree and then it acts on those actions. And in the scenario where you're bringing overwhelming odds to a particular fight, that might weigh heavier the AOE options that the boss has access to where they're utilizing a lot more AOE abilities during an engagement due to that overage of players. So in that sense, it's a bit adaptive. It's a bit dynamic based on the encounter scenario.
And you haven't really seen our full AI encounters yet. We're very much in our core loop state as we're showing this showcase. So for people being like, we
Yeah.
don't see that right now, it's because we're not showing that quite yet.
And that's what we got for the January update. There are 2 threads up on the forums right now, one for tanking and one for looting. So if you have thoughts on either of those subjects, please go share them with the development team. Now, Alpha 2 has over 100,000 players signed up as of now. And we can expect that number to increase and boom once the date is finally, released. It's going to be a significant test for the development team. I know we're sitting on pins and needles in anticipation, but the developers are going to take their time to create as good of a product as possible because the game could very well live or die based on its reception in Alpha 2. I, for one, can wait and bide my time if it means we get the right product, and I hope you all can too. So, until next time.